Hi guys, welcome to the book of James, and if you're still tracking with us, we are up to part number 9, and if you have done that and you have watched all of them up to part number 9, let me just say well done, because there is a lot of information that has come out in the first 8 parts. Now if you've stumbled across this video and you're just watching it, let me just frame it with this particular video or YouTube clip. You've got to understand that there's 7 other talks before this one, and then there's a whole lot more after this one. So don't just watch this particular one and say, well, that's the number one thing I need to learn or need to do in regards to the book of James. This is just part of the book of James, and I want to encourage you, go back and watch the ones that you've missed, and also, go forward and watch the ones that you might have, are coming up. So make sure that you do that, because I'll tell you, it sort of all goes together. And if you just take one part out of context, sometimes it can seem a little bit, but when you put it all together, you can see that James is clearly speaking to us. Now, we are reading out of James chapter 1. We're still in chapter 1, and we've made a lot of thoughts, a lot of comments about it. But let me encourage you to go back and read the whole thing just by yourself, read through the whole passage of it and actually see what it says and put it all into context. I want to start with this today, and it's where I finished off last week, if you're following it. And it comes from James chapter 1, and it comes from verse 20. Now, it starts with because it's because I finished off last week. But it says this: because human anger does not produce the righteousness that comes from God. And last week we touched on a little bit of anger. We touched on what causes to be angry, and we touched on how to get rid of it. And we're just starting there in sort of, beginning of verse 20, and we've got to realize that there is human anger and then there is godly anger or righteous anger. So it's a big topic, but the human anger, the anger when we just get frustrated because we're not getting our own way, because we're not getting what we want or getting the things done the way we want them to done, that does not produce anything good in our life. In fact, it says that it actually produces nothing, and it actually takes away the righteousness that God has got for us. So make sure that you don't go down that path. Now, going on to verse 21, it says this. It says, therefore, get rid of all moral filth and evil that is so prevalent and humanly acceptable, that the words that are planted in you, which can save you. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, but let me just try and unpack it for you. I'm just reading here, from the Bible and, from the laptop, as you can see. But God is saying to us that we've got to realize that there is human desires that get planted in us. There are seeds of things that are not going to produce a good life for us that are planted with us. And what God is actually saying, He's actually asking you to be like the gardener of your life. If you had a garden and you had a nice tree in it, and yet then there was weeds that were growing up, around that because the seeds have blown in there, and there's just things that are just weeds. God's saying, go over to that garden and pull the weeds out and just leave the tree there that you originally planted. Now flick that over to your life. There are seeds of things that have grown up in our lives. There are things that have caused us to be angry. There are things that have caused us to be tempted and to sin. There's things that we just think everyone else is having more fun than what we are. And God is saying, go into your own life and pull the weeds out of your life. Because what God has for you is a beautiful tree that will stand strong, a beautiful life that will do well, that all that God's created for you to do will happen in your life. But sometimes the weeds are choking you from becoming all what God wants you to be. And I want to encourage you today. God has an awesome life for you. He has an awesome family for you, an awesome marriage, awesome relationships. He wants you and Him to connect. There's a lot going on that God wants for you. But sometimes we get seeds in our life. Well, sometimes, a lot of the time, all of us, we get seeds in our life that grow up, weeds grow up around our life, and they choke us from becoming what God wants us to become. And that's why God is saying, get rid of all that moral filth and the evil that just prevails so easily in our life. Get rid of it, because you'll be surprised what God can do with your life, when you look at what He has planted in you. Now, let me read verse 21 to you. It says this, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. So now we're talking about two different things that have been planted in your life. There is the weeds that get planted in your life that God's asking us to pull out, but He's also asking us to be humble and to accept the words that are planted in you from God that He's given you that can save you. Now, those words come from His voice. They come from the book of James. They come from other parts of the Bible. There are words and seeds that have been planted in you from messages you've watched on YouTube, from preachers that you've seen in church. There are seeds that have been planted in you. James is planting good seed into our life. And we've got to water that and be humble enough to accept that and allow those good things to grow up in our life. Because if we don't, then the weeds will come in. They will automatically be there. I don't know how weeds work, but they always turn up in the garden, whether you plant them there or not, and then they wreck the garden and they choke it. And what James is talking to us about is he wants you to be a good gardener of your life. He wants you to understand that there are weeds that can be planted, but there's also truth that can be planted. Every time you watch a video like this, there are seeds of truth that are being planted in you. Every time you read books like the book of James, there are seeds of truth that are being planted in you. But those seeds have to be watered and encouraged and accepted and fertilized and humbly accepted and allow them to grow up in your life so you can become what God wants you to be. But the flip side is there's the weeds that come. They just come from the temptations and the things that we don't even really know how they got there. And God is saying, treat your life like a garden. God has planted you to be a beautiful, strong tree, a beautiful, strong man or woman of God that can stand the test of time and live for His purpose and have an awesome life. But just remember that to have that, you've got to accept the good seeds that are sown, which will give you life, and pull out the bad seeds that have also been sown that'll take you to destruction and death. This is James appealing to us, and I'm now appealing to you. Realize your life is a garden. Your life is going to have good that comes to it, and it's going to have evil that comes to it. And it's up to you to balance and water the good seeds that you see from church and YouTube and the Bible and things like that when you're watching Christian content. And it's also up for you to pull the weeds out that also come from YouTube and the internet and life and things that throw around us, everywhere else. So just remember, there's these two forces that are at work. And James is saying, get rid of one and water the other. Realize that both of these things are going to come to you, and you've got to be the one that decides what goes and what stays. And what you allow to stay will either help you or it will hinder you. And what you allow to stay will either bless you or you reject the truth, and then you end up right in the middle of somewhere where you don't want to be. So let me encourage you again the same way that James has. In part number 9 of the James series, it's sort of like a bookender of all that happens in the book of James. Remember, there's these two forces that are coming down. Choose to water one and get rid of the other. Trust me, this will help you have the best life ever. So until I see you next time, keep reading, keep sowing, keep pulling, keep planting, keep going. See you soon.